there is so much confusion out there nowadays because every personality typologist has their own system that they're using. What do you do then? I will share with you my own philosophy when it comes to personality typologies, and hopefully that will give you more insight and make it easier for you to make your own choices. Everyone has their own experiences, their own personal take, and therefore you will get different systems, different explanations, even of the same functions, of the same types, of the same wings, instincts, anything you can find. I can give you already a hint to the solution to that, which is to not only learn about a system or learn about someone's methods, but also see for yourself if their philosophy aligns with what you're looking for in your own life, or what kind of philosophy you yourself have. And that's also a segue to my philosophies, my origins. At least when it comes to the theory, my origin, it started with MBTI, then it went into Enneagram, and then it went into Socionics. Oh, on that note, I should also mention, of course, Jung himself and his book. Okay, let's go back to MBTI. I like that it's popular. I like that overall it focuses on the essentials. So it focuses on the first, second function, and also the tertiary and inferior, which in Socionics are the other valued functions. However, nowadays there are so many stereotypes that are just untrue and diminish certain personality types, and other theories don't work, other compatibility metrics don't really work with MBTI. For that, check out my latest video where I talked about my unpopular opinions when it comes to MBTI. Connected to that, when we go into Socionics, that's probably my main origin when it comes to my take on the 16 personality types. One of the core ideas is that you have your own type with your strengths and weaknesses, and it is better to find people who complement those strengths and weaknesses rather than trying to attempt that by yourself, which is actually different from the core of a lot of Jungian teachings, at least what I've come across online. And some people cling on to that, where they say, well, Jung talked about integration. If we use the term of dualization from Socionics, essentially Jung is all about, at least that's what they say, dualizing by yourself. Let's say you are an extrovert sensing type, you are supposed to integrate introverted intuition. Your opposite function, you're supposed to integrate that and inhabit that more or strengthen it. And you also see that with the inferior function, where people say, oh, you should develop your inferior function. There's a lot of content on how to develop your weaker functions, your inferior functions, and things like that. I don't subscribe to that at all. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't see the value in being in touch with your inferior function or your opposite. Actually, in Socionics, a lot of the talk when it comes to the opposite function is you're supposed to find that in other people. Now, where Socionics goes too far, in my opinion, is when they say everyone should be with a dual. Everyone should be with the exact opposite of your own type, that's the only match you should focus on. To be fair, Socionics doesn't necessarily say you have to do that, but a lot of people make that the main thing. So that it's like, okay, unless you are with a dual, everything else is screwed, and that's the only way to be happy in life. And that's not true either, at least in my opinion. You don't have to do that. However, I do think that it is best if you find people in your life. It can be a romantic partner, but it can also be other kinds of people. It can be people online, teachers, mentors, counselors, whatever, coaches, who have one of your weaker functions as a stronger function, and they can teach you about it. In that sense, yes, I do think it is better to actually find people who can complement that or who can specialize in those areas. And this is where I flowed into purpose roles, because I believe that every personality type, every 16 Jungian personality type, has a purpose in our society. And I've also made videos about the purpose role concept that I have coined, you could say. When I started out being interested in personality type theory, back then I was totally lost, and I had this habit and this tendency of following what other people were saying I should do. If you're unlucky, you are surrounded by people who have incompatible personality types, aka who have very different cognitive values. And even just the fact that, let's say it's parents, that they're from a different generation, that already can also create issues. So it's not just a functional problem, it can also just be a generational problem. Sometimes people think that some people have incompatible types, but it could just be a generational gap, or it could just be some other kind of gap. Anyhow, I was really lost. I was not really following what would suit my personality. That's where it comes from. I had to rediscover myself and rediscover my personality. And through doing that, I finally found some kind of solace. I found some kind of inspiration back. And you can see that with my content online, with my teachings, my blog. I think my typevolution.com blog has been around since 2016. And this is the only place, or was back then also, the only place where I could really just be myself, so to speak, and express my full personality. And I was not able to do that in my real life. So for me, it was rather rediscovering who I am, opposed to trying to develop my weaker functions. Because whenever I was obsessed with developing my weaknesses, it made me unhappy, it made me stuck. And whenever I still do that from time to time, it doesn't really work. We don't really live in a vacuum, and our strengths are there for a reason. And I believe that if you don't focus and specialize in who you are, in your personality strengths, you're going to be ineffective, and you're going to be also, interestingly, you're going to likely be more unattractive, at least to the right kinds of personalities out there. So once I stepped more into who I am and what my personality is good at and what it values, a lot of things shifted. A lot of things started to fall into place. My confidence increased, and I was also able to actually find people and attract people into my life who suited that better. And I noticed whenever I sway more away from my core self, you could say, then I often see that I become more restless, I become more distracted, I end up being around people who don't really suit my personality and things like that. So essentially my philosophy really boils down to the whole purpose role idea, to the idea that the same cognitive values are the most compatible with each other, etc. And once again, it's all about the philosophy behind it. For me, the philosophy is that we are all inherently possessing a rough idea of what our purpose is. Now, the exact manifestation, precisely in every detail, that depends on everything else. Depends on your genetics, depends on your environment, where you are. It depends on, your inborn talents to some extent. It depends on the skills you developed or will develop in the future. So there's all these other factors that go into it. And that's why even if I give you a purpose role or a personality typing in the 16 Jungian system, it still gives a lot of room for your own expression, for how you will manifest that purpose. When it comes to Enneagram, there's also so many philosophies out there. Also for that, just watch my other video on my unpopular opinions when it comes to Enneagram. Overall, the philosophy I have with Enneagram is that every Enneagram type is an ego type. So it is a manifestation of your ego. And ego is our sense of self. If you have no subject, if you have no ego or sense of self, you are just another object. There was some kind of evolutionary advantage to having an ego and a subjective self. But the problem is with the Enneagram types that this ego can slip into very unhealthy mindsets and behaviors. But these are often actually a reaction or more a signal that your instinctual needs are hurting. I have found that if you improve your instinctual needs and you fulfill them better, usually your ego or Enneagram type improves as well. And also one common issue I've seen with Enneagram, especially when it comes to the instincts, there's also this philosophy around the sexual instinct, and there's also different camps. Like one camp tends to say the sexual instinct is all about live or die, hardcore attraction, magnetism, and it doesn't matter at all about bonding and connection and things like that. And that's all supposed to be social stuff. I don't subscribe to that belief at all. So if that's you, you are not at the right front, you're not at the right avenue here. That's not the kind of philosophy I have. When we work together with my coaching clients and I tell them, yeah, you should probably improve your sexual instinct, I would not say to only focus just on magnetism and passion. I mean, yes, passion is important, but I would also usually recommend finding a romantic partner or having some kind of more deep, meaningful connection. It doesn't always have to be a romantic partner, but usually that's what it manifests as. And yeah, this goes against a lot of the teachings when they say, no, sexual instinct is not about that. In my experience, it is about that. In my experience, what I've observed, it is also the healthiest expression. You could say one of the more evolved versions. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone has to be in a committed relationship. There's different relationship styles out there. I'm very much aware of that. But it's usually for the average person, for most people, that's what I've found to be true. So this is the kind of advice I would give when it comes to that instinct. As you can see, you kind of have to piece together what the person's experience is, what the person's view on the world is, what their main philosophies are, because they're often hidden underneath their system. You have to look underneath the hood. You have to look at what is behind all of this. What is the value system behind this or the philosophy behind this? What do they actually believe? And go from there, because that will actually give you way more insight into where they're coming from. At last, I also want to point out that a lot of personality systems nowadays, the main point they have, or the main upside you could say, is the system itself or the typing method itself, where it's all about just typing people, like just recognizing types and putting people into those typological boxes and adding all kinds of different letters and subtypes and etc., etc. Now, I do have videos about personality types and how to recognize them and the functions and communication styles. Also on that note, I forgot to mention with Socionics, even though I am mostly a fan of Gulenko, for example, there's also Gulenko theories I don't agree with either. DCNH system stuff also goes above my head because I find it is too much and also another system for its own sake, rather than actually a necessary and valuable addition to the theory. However, there's other theories of his that I do find quite valuable. So that's the problem with typology people. At some point, they just come up with systems for the sake of coming up with systems, and it just becomes this endless rabbit hole, and it doesn't lead anywhere really. So people just end up typing and categorizing things, which may or may not be accurate even, and then that's all there is to it, which is okay. I mean, if that's what you enjoy doing, that's fair, and I also enjoy it to some extent. But at the end of the day, at least with my take, is I want you not to only be able to recognize personality types, but also in order to recognize what kind of personalities are most compatible with you, what kinds of personality type you are, and how it impacts your purpose in life. And purpose can mean career, though I also don't want to focus too much on career because I'm not a career coach. More of like a life purpose, fulfillment, that kind of coach. So it's less about necessarily a direct career, but what you do with your life, what your lifestyle is like, what kind of hobbies, pastimes you have. Because that will increase your enjoyment or fulfillment in your life, your confidence, and will also attract the people to you who are more compatible with you. If you really want to learn my take, then you have to look at my descriptions on my website, typologian.com/TVT, for example. But there's all kinds of articles on there. Watch my content. You will have to familiarize yourself with my method, my way of doing things, because it's going to be different from other people. Now, you don't have to become any kind of expert. It's actually even better if you don't have any very strong notions of how things are, because then you might be unwilling to follow what I say, right? Which is fair, fine. I'm not saying you have to do it. You can click off the video. Even if you cannot totally agree with every little detail or every little typing I'm doing, the overall gist, if that resonates with you, I would really encourage you. It could be a good idea to work together with me to get to that next level. Like I said, you can check out my services at typologian.com/services, and see you in the next video. Bye.